You've seen billionaires on magazine covers, smiling, flawless, untouchable. But no one saw this. The footage begins on a night drowned in rain. A trembling 12-year-old girl stands at the gate of Grant Industries, her clothes soaked, her hands clutching a cardboard sign. Her lips move, but her voice is swallowed by thunder. "Please, I'll work for my grandma's medicine." Headlights cut through the downpour. A black Rolls-Royce halts in front of her. For a moment, there's silence. The door opens, and the man who steps out has a face the world knows too well: Michael Grant, the billionaire every news anchor calls the coldest man in America. He doesn't speak right away. He just looks at her, that calm, unblinking stare that built empires and broke thousands of lives. The girl's voice shakes. "Please, sir, I can clean floors, anything." He lowers his umbrella. Rain soaks his suit. Then, in a voice that's disturbingly quiet, he says, "Who told you I'd care?" The world stops. The girl freezes. The cameras flash from across the street, a photo that will soon shatter an empire. By morning, that image is everywhere. Billionaire rejects begging girl in the rain. His company stock crashes. Protesters fill the streets, but as the world curses his name, one question no one can answer begins to spread. Why did the richest man in the city walk away from a child who looked exactly like his own daughter, the one who vanished 7 years ago? They call it the Grant Incident. A single moment that exposed everything a billion-dollar smile was hiding. Reporters dig into his past. Files surface that were never meant to be found. An orphanage receipt with his signature, a burned birth record, a trust fund linked to a woman named Eleanor Parker, Emily's grandmother. Every clue points toward one impossible truth. The girl he turned away that night might be the last living reminder of the secret he paid millions to erase. Inside his mansion, Michael Grant locks himself away. No interviews, no statements, only silence. But security logs show something strange. Every night at 2:14 a.m., he replays the same footage of the girl standing in the rain, over and over. His staff say he's losing control. His board wants him gone. And yet deep within the heart of his empire, files are being deleted, one by one. Behind the corporate headlines and flashing cameras, a darker story is unfolding. One that money can't bury and truth refuses to stay quiet about. Because somewhere in that rain-soaked night, a secret changed hands. A secret powerful enough to destroy everything Michael Grant ever built. And it all began with a single sentence. "Who told you I'd care?" The world saw a heartless billionaire. But behind the headlines, behind the photo of a man walking away from a crying child, something else was happening. Emily Parker, 12 years old, walked home that night through flooded streets, her cardboard sign turning to pulp in her hands. The city lights flickered across broken windows and rusted fences. At her side, a small brown paper bag protected a single bottle of painkillers, all she could afford after 3 days of begging. At home, her grandmother, Martha Parker, lay on a sagging couch, her body weak from paralysis, her breaths shallow. The old woman smiled when she saw Emily. "You've been out late again," she whispered. Emily forced a smile. "I got us something, Grandma." She hid the bottle behind her back. It wasn't the medicine they needed, but it was all she could find. Her voice cracked as she spoke. "Tomorrow will be better. I'll try again." Martha brushed her cheek. "You have your mother's courage," she said softly. "Don't let this world take it from you." That same night, in a penthouse that touched the clouds, Michael Grant sat alone before a wall of city lights. His phone buzzed non-stop. Journalists, board members, publicists, but he answered none. On his desk, a paused video showed Emily's face, soaked and shivering. He stared at it for a long time, expression unreadable. "Who told you I'd care?" he had said. The words echoed now, hollow and unfamiliar. He reached for a glass of whiskey, his hand trembling. Not from guilt, he told himself, but from exhaustion. Yet deep inside, something old stirred. He turned to a photo frame hidden behind a row of awards. Inside was the image of a woman, smiling, kind-eyed, holding a baby girl. His late wife, Clara, gone 7 years. The child, Ava, declared missing in the same accident that took her mother's life. He'd buried that pain beneath wealth and power. But Emily's face, it had reopened a door he'd locked long ago. 3 days later, Grant Industries held a press conference. Michael appeared calm, composed, his tailored suit immaculate. He spoke of misunderstandings, edited footage, corporate values. But as reporters fired questions, a photograph slid across the table from an anonymous hand, an old staff record from 20 years ago. Name, Sarah Parker. Position, personal assistant to Michael Grant. Termination date, the day before her fatal accident. The room went silent. A journalist whispered, "Is she related to the girl?" Michael didn't answer. He just stared at the paper, his past staring back at him. Then he stood, ending the conference without a word. Behind the scenes, whispers spread like wildfire. Executives recalled a young woman who once worked for Michael, loyal, intelligent, always smiling. And then one night, she was gone. Now her daughter had appeared, years later, at the gates of his empire. Coincidence, or something far deeper? Meanwhile, Emily returned to Grant Industries every morning, standing outside the same gate, rain or shine, clutching her resume, a piece of paper stained and torn. The guards ignored her. The employees hurried past, until one afternoon, a woman in a gray suit approached her. Isabel Rowe, Michael's personal assistant. "You shouldn't be here," Isabel said quietly. "I just need work," Emily replied, "for my grandma." Isabel hesitated, glancing toward the building's tall windows. Then she pressed something into her hand, a small business card. "Come back tomorrow, alone. Use the service entrance." Emily looked at the card. It read, "Grant Estate, Staff Wing." That night, Michael received a call from Isabel. "There's something you need to know," she said. "The girl from the video, she came back." He froze. "What do you mean, came back?" "She's been outside every day. She says she'll work for you. I thought maybe you should see her." He didn't respond. The line went quiet for several seconds. Then coldly he said, "Keep her away from me." But the next morning his car stopped near the service gate, anyway. Through tinted glass, he watched Emily sweeping the pavement with an old broom. Her movements were slow, but steady. Her expression, focused, determined. For a moment, Michael saw a reflection of his younger self, the boy who once cleaned factory floors for $1 an hour after his father abandoned him. He turned away, jaw tight. "Drive," he muttered. The driver hesitated. "Sir, the cameras are—" "I said drive." Days turned to weeks. The world moved on, but inside Grant Industries, unease grew. Someone was leaking old files. Anonymous packages arrived at newsrooms, photos, letters, legal documents,
all pointing toward a scandal that could ruin everything. At the center of it all, a mysterious trust fund created in Clara Grant's name, signed jointly by Michael Grant and Sarah Parker. The date? 1 week before Sarah's death. Emily found herself quietly hired by Isabel as a janitor, working night shifts when the offices were empty. She moved silently through the hallways, sweeping floors and emptying bins. But one night, curiosity pulled her toward the restricted archives on the top floor. Inside, under flickering lights, she found a locked cabinet marked Confidential. When she tugged the drawer, a folder slipped free and landed open. Inside was a photograph of her mother and Michael Grant, smiling, standing beside a charity sign.
Future Hearts Foundation, in memory of Clara Grant. Emily's hand shook. Her mother had never told her she knew him. Why? She turned another page. A letter, signed by Michael. "Sarah, once the merger is complete, she'll be safe. Trust me." Her breath caught. Who was she? Her grandmother? Herself? Someone else? Footsteps echoed in the corridor. Emily stuffed the papers into her pocket and ran. The next morning, Michael stormed into Isabel's office. "Who authorized a janitor on the executive floor last night?" "No one," Isabel replied carefully. "Find her." By evening, security had traced the badge swipe. Emily Parker. Michael froze at the name. His mind spun. Could it be true? Could Sarah Parker's child really be alive, standing in his building? He demanded to see her. When Emily was brought in, her clothes still smudged with dust, she stood before him, frightened but unbroken. He stared at her for a long time, then whispered, "Your mother, what did she tell you about me?" Emily frowned. Nothing. Just that she worked for a man who promised too much and left her with nothing. Michael looked away. "She wasn't supposed to die," he muttered under his breath. "What do you mean?" Emily asked. But he didn't answer. That night, security cameras captured something strange. Michael Grant leaving his office after midnight, driving to an old address on the outskirts of the city. An abandoned house. Inside, walls lined with photographs, letters, burnt newspaper clippings. On the kitchen table, a single photo. Emily's mother holding baby Emily, with the words, "She must never know," scrawled on the back. Michael sank into a chair, his head in his hands. Everything he'd buried, every lie, every secret, was crawling back to life. Days later, Martha Parker was rushed to the hospital. Emily sat by her bedside, holding her hand, tears in her eyes. "Grandma, please don't leave me," she whispered. Martha smiled faintly. "Emily, you need to find the man your mother trusted, the one she worked for. He knows the truth." Emily's tears fell harder. "I already found him, and he hates me." Martha's hand tightened weakly around hers. "Then make him remember." Across the city, Michael Grant received a call that froze his blood. It was from an unknown number, but the voice on the other end was unmistakable. "You think you buried your past, Michael. You didn't. It's standing right outside your door." The line went dead. When he opened his front gate the next morning, a small envelope lay on the ground. Inside was a photograph of Emily, asleep in the hospital waiting room, holding her grandmother's hand. And on the back were 5 words that made his heart stop. "She deserves to know everything." In that moment, for the first time in his life, Michael Grant felt something he couldn't control. fear. Not of losing his empire, but of losing the last chance to make things right. He knew then what he had to do. 3. The scandal hadn't faded. If anything, it was growing teeth. Every news outlet was now running the same story. Cold billionaire faces child labor allegations. Grant Industries' stocks wavered. Investors panicked. Inside the corporate tower, silence became the new atmosphere. A silence thick with suspicion and fear. Michael Grant sat in his glass-walled office, unmoving. On the screen before him, Emily's face, again. His PR manager, Clara Vance, stood nearby, pacing. "Michael, you need to act. The narrative is killing us. People think you hate children. They think you turned your back on some sick old woman. We can fix this. Sponsor the girl, pay her bills, public apology. It'll turn sympathy back in our favor." He didn't respond. "Michael," Clara pressed, lowering her voice, "if we spin this right, she'll be your redemption story." That word, redemption, made his jaw tighten. He stared out at the skyline. "Do whatever you want," he said. "Just keep her away from me." But as the door closed behind her, he whispered to himself, barely audible, "She shouldn't even exist." Emily Parker, meanwhile, was fighting time. Her grandmother's health was failing fast. The hospital bills were beyond what she could imagine paying. Still, every morning she returned to the company gates, broom in hand, hope in her eyes. Some employees pitied her, others ignored her. But one woman, Isabel, the assistant who had helped her before, noticed something changing. Michael had begun arriving earlier, always before sunrise, always taking the same route, always slowing the car, just long enough to glance at Emily before the gates closed behind him. That morning, Emily made a decision. She waited by the side entrance, her hands trembling around an old photograph, the only one she had left of her mother. In it, her mom stood beside a man, half turned from the camera, smiling faintly. His face was younger, softer, but the resemblance was undeniable. Michael Grant. When he stepped out of his car, she ran forward, blocking his path. "Please, I think you knew my mother." He froze, annoyance flickering in his eyes. "Move aside." She held up the photo. "Her name was Sarah Parker. She worked here. Do you remember her?" The color drained from his face. For a split second, the world around him faded. The honking cars, the shouting guards, the falling rain, all gone. He stared at the picture, every breath slow, heavy. Sarah Parker, the woman he once loved, the one he let go, the one whose heart he broke to save his company. His fingers twitched at his side. He could still remember her laugh, the smell of her perfume, the night she told him she was pregnant. He'd denied it then. He had to. He'd already been engaged to Clara, the woman who would secure his empire. Now, 12 years later, the truth stood before him, alive, breathing, staring up at him with the same eyes Sarah once had. "Used to work here," she said softly. "Do you know her?" He couldn't answer. Inside the building, security footage captured the moment he turned and walked away, but those who watched the clip later said they saw something strange. The look in his eyes wasn't cold this time. It was fear. Back in his office, Michael shut the door, locking himself in. He pulled out an old metal box from a hidden drawer. Inside were yellowed letters, photographs, a bracelet, and a single hospital record. Mother, Sarah Parker. Child, female, unnamed. His heart hammered. Could it be her? If the truth came out,
If the media discovered that the girl from the scandal was his blood, his career would be destroyed. His company would collapse under accusations of fraud, scandal, and deceit. Everything he built to bury his past would crumble overnight. But still, one question gnawed at him. What if it's true? That night, his PR manager Clara called an emergency meeting. "We'll use the girl," she said. "A charity program, Grant Cares Foundation. We'll pay her hospital bills, get the public back in our favor. It's the perfect angle." Michael's voice was calm but cold. "No." "Michael, this could save you." "No," he repeated sharper this time. "You'll leave her out of this." Clara smirked. "Why? Because she looks like someone you once knew?" He turned toward her. "Because she's a child, not a prop." The room went quiet. For the first time, Michael's voice carried something that sounded almost like emotion. Clara left without another word, but she didn't drop it. She had her own secrets to keep, and selling his would make her rich. Meanwhile, Emily kept searching through the archives during her night shifts. Old files, termination letters, payroll logs, anything that could explain why her mother was fired the day before she died. Then one night, she found it. A confidential memo with Michael Grant's digital signature. "Terminate immediately. Must remain off the record. Personal matter."
Her heart broke. The man she'd begged for help, the man who could have saved her grandmother, was the same man who'd ruined her mother's life. She dropped to her knees, tears hitting the paper. "Why would you do that to her?" she whispered. She didn't know that in another part of the building, Michael was standing by a window, staring down at the street below, the same spot where Sarah Parker once stood, begging him for another chance. History was repeating itself. The next day, Clara went rogue. Without Michael's permission, she leaked the Grant Cares story to the press, painting him as a savior of the very girl he'd humiliated. Reporters swarmed Emily's home. Cameras followed her to school. Her grandmother's hospital was surrounded. Michael was furious. "Who leaked it?" he demanded. Clara smiled. "You're welcome. Your image is recovering. People love a redemption story." He slammed his fist on the desk. "I said stay away from her." She leaned closer. "Michael, what are you so afraid the world will find out?" The next morning, Emily was escorted into his office for a photo opportunity. Michael looked at her, guilt flooding his eyes. "I didn't ask for this," he said. "I didn't either," she replied quietly. The photographer adjusted his lens. "Sir, could you stand closer to her?" Michael hesitated, then moved beside Emily. When the flash went off, the world froze again. In that moment, standing side by side, the resemblance was undeniable. Same jawline, same eyes, same look of quiet defiance. Clara noticed it instantly, and for her, that was confirmation enough. That night, the headline broke. "DNA Scandal. Billionaire's secret connection to orphan girl exposed." Michael's world imploded. The board called for his resignation. Shareholders demanded answers. Journalists camped outside his mansion, shouting questions he couldn't face. Inside, he sat in silence, staring at a paternity report Laura had obtained through an anonymous lab test using a hair strand from Emily's jacket. The results were clear. Probability of paternity, 99.7%. His hands shook. She wasn't just a stranger. She wasn't just a reminder of his sins. She was his daughter. The next evening, Michael showed up at the hospital where Martha was lying dying. He stood in the doorway, silent, unsure. Martha's eyes opened weakly. "You look just like him," she whispered to Emily. Then, spotting Michael in the doorway, her voice trembled. "So,
You finally came." Emily turned, shocked. "You know him?" Martha coughed, struggling to breathe. "He was there the night your mother died." Michael froze. "No, Martha, that's not—" "You trusted you," the old woman said, her voice fading. "You promised to keep them safe." Emily's face went pale. "What is she talking about?" Tears filled Michael's eyes. He took a step forward, voice breaking. "I made a deal to save my company, and it cost your mother's life." Martha passed away that night, leaving behind one final note in her trembling handwriting. "The truth doesn't destroy, it frees." Emily left the hospital and vanished. Reporters claimed she'd run away. Clara leaked more documents to fuel the chaos. And Michael, the man who'd once owned everything, was left alone with the one thing money could never fix: guilt. For weeks he searched for Emily. No one had seen her. Until one morning, his driver handed him an envelope found taped to the mansion gate. Inside was a photograph, a little girl holding her mother's old bracelet, standing in front of a grave. On the back, a single line was written in careful, shaking letters. "You cared once, you can again." Michael dropped the photo, breath catching in his throat. The story the world thought it knew was far from over. Because somewhere out there, a girl was uncovering the truth about her mother, her father, and the empire built on lies. And for the first time in his life, Michael Grant wasn't running from his past. He was chasing it.
The sound of rain fades. The camera pans slowly over the towering glass headquarters of Grant Industries, the empire Michael Grant built from the ashes of betrayal. Inside, under the soft hum of fluorescent lights, he sits alone in his office. The photo Emily had shown him lies on the desk, its edges still wet from the rain. Sarah Parker, the name he had buried long ago. The woman whose laughter once softened his world, and whose loss hardened it forever. Michael's hand trembles as he flips through old files hidden beneath years of mergers and contracts. Then he finds it, the termination report, dated a day before Sarah's death, signed by him, a signature that feels like a curse. But when he saw the name on her mother's file, his hands began to shake. He slams the folder shut just as his PR manager, Clara Vance, steps in, elegant, calculating, her smile polished for headlines. "Sir," she says smoothly, "the camera's caught you talking to that girl. The internet's already calling it the cold billionaire and the street child. I can spin this, maybe start a Hope Grant Foundation in your name. A few pictures, a donation." Michael cuts her off. No, she's just a child who came here by mistake. But later that night, he can't sleep. Emily's voice echoes in his head, small, desperate, trembling. "Please, sir, I'll do anything." The next morning, Emily returns to the gates. She's soaked again, but this time she's holding her grandmother's medical file. The guards block her path. "Please, just give this to Mr. Grant." From the top floor, Michael watches through tinted glass. He's torn between impulse and image. For years, he's lived by one rule: never let emotion decide business. But this isn't business anymore. It's something deeper, something dangerous. He calls security. Let her in. Inside, Emily stands before him again, smaller than he remembers, her eyes too brave for her age. She hands him the papers. "She's dying," she whispers. "If I can work, anything, cleaning, sweeping, I'll pay it back." Michael looks down at her trembling hands. They remind him of Sarah's. He can barely breathe. She thought the billionaire was helping her. until she heard what he said on the phone. Hours later, Clara storms into his office. "You can't let this girl hang around here, Michael. The press will destroy you if they find out who she is." Michael's voice turns cold. "I said she's just another charity case." But behind the closed door, Emily's tiny frame stiffens. She had been standing there, just outside, listening. Her eyes fill with tears. The man she thought was her miracle saw her as nothing more than a stain on his image. She runs out into the rain again, clutching the photo of her mother. That night, Michael sits alone in his penthouse, glass of whiskey untouched. He turns on the news. Emily's face flashes across the screen. Young girl begs billionaire for her grandmother's medicine. Reporters swarm her neighborhood, spinning her pain into spectacle. Michael lowers his head. For the first time in years, guilt pierces through the armor he's built. He knows what the world doesn't. Sarah Parker didn't just work for him. She died because of him. And that's when the test results arrived. 2 days later, an envelope arrives at Grant Industries. No sender, just a single line written on the front. For Michael Grant's eyes only. Inside, a DNA report. Positive match. Emily Parker. 99.9% probability. Michael's world collapses in silence. The girl he'd dismissed was his blood. He calls Clara immediately. "Who sent this?" Her voice falters. "We don't know, but if this leaks, your empire will burn." The phone drops from his hand. The truth feels heavier than his fortune. He stares out over the city he owns, every light a reminder of what he's built on lies. The next scene cuts to Emily's home, a crumbling apartment where her grandmother lies, coughing weakly. "Don't cry, sweetheart," Martha whispers. "Your mother, she believed in people, even when they didn't deserve it." Emily wipes her tears. "I'll find a way, Grandma, I promise." Outside, a black car idles. Michael sits inside, hidden behind tinted glass, watching. Torn. He could send money anonymously. He could fix everything quietly. But he also knows the truth is a storm waiting to break. He thought he could control the story. But someone else was already writing the ending. Because Clara Vance, the PR manager who once promised to protect him, has other plans, she leaks the DNA results to a rival news outlet. Within hours, headlines explode. Billionaire Michael Grant hides secret daughter. The press surrounds Emily's home. Paparazzi flashlights blind her as she shields her grandmother. Michael's name trends worldwide. His company's stock plummets. He rushes to her house through the chaos. For the first time, he steps out of his car without bodyguards, without cameras, without power. Just guilt. "Emily," he pleads, "please, let me explain." But the girl's eyes are full of betrayal. "You had your chance," she whispers. The documentary tone slows. Quiet. Heavy. Narrator's voice deepens. "In the world of the rich, secrets are currency. But what happens when a truth buried for 12 years rises again, and this time demands payment in love, loss, and legacy?" Michael stands at the edge of everything he's built, facing the one thing he's spent his life avoiding, the truth. And just when he decides to tell the world everything, to admit that Emily is his daughter, a single phone call changes everything. The voice on the other end says,
calm and dangerous. Tell the truth, and Martha Parker won't live to see another sunrise. The line goes dead. Michael's face turns pale. The war he thought was over has only just begun. And as the narrator's voice fades, the final line cuts through like a blade. He thought the past was buried, but the past had a name, a face, and now a reason to fight back.
The hospital room was quiet, except for the slow, steady sound of the heart monitor. Martha Parker lay still on the bed, her thin hand limp against the blanket. Beside her, Emily slept in a chair, her head resting on her arms, clutching a worn company badge that read Grant Industries. Her small fingers tightened around it, as though it were the last thing holding her world together. The door opened softly. Michael Grant stepped inside, his face pale, his eyes hollow. He had stood in front of boardrooms, in front of presidents, and in front of the press, but nothing had ever made him hesitate the way this room did. He stopped by the doorway and looked at them. The little girl who didn't know she was his daughter. The old woman who once told him to do right before it was too late. He approached slowly, his footsteps silent on the cold floor. He looked down at Emily, sleeping, exhausted, her face streaked with tears. He placed an envelope beside her, the edge of it sliding under her arm. The hospital bill, paid in full. No note, no name. Just the quiet act of a man trying to undo 12 years of damage. He turned to leave, but then Martha's frail voice broke the silence. "Michael," she whispered, "is that you?" He froze. Her eyes opened halfway. She looked at him, and for a moment, the years fell away. "You came," she said softly. "You kept your promise." His throat tightened. "I should have come sooner." She smiled weakly. "It's never too late to do one good thing." Her eyes closed again. "Take care of her, Michael. She's her mother's strength, and yours." He stood there long after she drifted back into sleep, staring at the little girl and the woman who had once tried to save them both. The next morning, Emily woke up to find the envelope. She opened it and saw the receipt. Her hands trembled. Her grandmother's bills, all paid. The nurse smiled when Emily asked who had done it. "Someone who cares," the nurse said. Emily ran from the hospital, the badge still in her hand, her heart pounding. At Grant Mansion, the guards tried to stop her, but she pushed past them. She found Michael in his study, staring out at the city. The rain beat against the tall glass windows. Her voice was shaking when she spoke. "Why are you helping us now? You took everything from my mom." He turned. For a moment, he didn't answer. Then his voice cracked. "I didn't fire her, Emily. I was trying to protect her." She stared at him. "Protect her? From what?" He stepped closer, his shoulders heavy. "Your mother found out about a deal I made, a deal that wasn't clean. She threatened to expose it, and the people I worked with, they didn't forgive betrayal." Emily's breath caught. "You're saying my mom died because of you?" He looked down, his voice trembling. "Because I was afraid. I thought if I stayed quiet, I could keep her safe, but silence killed her." Tears filled Emily's eyes. "You ruined everything. You don't get to fix it now." He nodded slowly. "I know, but I can protect what's left of her. You." For the first time he saw him cry, the man everyone called untouchable, broken in front of her. That night, Emily sat by the fireplace, staring into the flames. Michael sat across the room, silent, watching her. The storm outside howled against the windows.
He finally spoke. "You have her eyes." Emily looked up sharply. "Don't say that." He continued quietly. "And her courage." The fire crackled. Neither of them spoke again for a long time. The next morning, reporters flooded the gates of Grant Mansion. The news spread like wildfire. The company was under federal investigation. Old secrets had resurfaced. Someone had leaked everything. Michael knew who it was. Clara Vance, his PR manager, the same woman who told him to hide the truth. At the press conference that followed, Michael stood before the cameras, his face calm but tired. He said, "12 years ago, I made a choice that destroyed lives. I buried the truth to protect my company. Today, I'm done hiding. Whatever happens now, I accept it." The reporters shouted questions. Flashes lit his face, but he didn't flinch. In the crowd, Emily watched silently. For the first time, she saw the man her mother once loved. Not the billionaire, not the monster, but the man who finally chose truth. That evening, the mansion was quiet again. Michael found Emily sitting by the piano. She didn't look up when he entered. "Your grandmother woke up," she said softly. "She asked about you. I told her you're trying." He smiled faintly, eyes glistening. "That's all I can do now." She turned to him. "What happens next?" I looked at her, the weight of everything he had lost and everything he had just found in his eyes. "Whatever comes, we face it together." Outside, the city lights flickered in the distance. Inside, the silence felt peaceful. Emily reached for the photograph of her mother and placed it beside the company badge on the piano. The two symbols, love and guilt, side by side. For a long moment, Michael just stared. Then he whispered, "I'm sorry, Sarah." Emily didn't say anything. She just sat there beside him, her hand resting on the piano key her mother once touched. And for the first time, Michael Grant, the man who once had everything, felt what it meant to be human again. Because in the end, he didn't find redemption in money or power. He found it in the eyes of a little girl who refused to give up on love.
The morning light filtered through the thin curtains of the small hospital room. The machines hummed quietly, steady and calm. For the first time in weeks, Martha Parker opened her eyes fully. Her hand trembled as she reached for the call button. But before she could press it, Emily was already awake, clutching her hand tightly and crying with relief. "Grandma, you're awake," Emily whispered, smiling through her tears. Martha's voice was faint but steady. "I told you, sweetheart, old souls don't leave until they finish their story." Michael entered quietly behind them. He looked exhausted, his usually sharp expression softened by days of sleeplessness. He didn't speak at first, just nodded respectfully. Martha turned her head slowly toward him. "You came," she murmured. He stepped closer. "I had to." A quiet tension filled the room. The air felt heavy, as if something long buried was about to surface. Martha looked between them, the child and the man, and her eyes glistened with a knowing sadness. "There's something I should have told you both long ago," she said softly. Emily frowned. "What do you mean?" Martha took a shaky breath. "Michael, your wife's death, it wasn't an accident." The room froze. Michael's jaw clenched, his hand tightening on the edge of the bed. "What are you talking about?" he asked quietly, his voice almost a whisper. Martha continued, her voice trembling but determined. "Your company, your board members, they knew. The night of the crash, they covered it up. Your wife had discovered financial records that pointed to illegal offshore accounts. She threatened to go public. They couldn't risk it, so they made sure the world thought it was a tragedy. Michael's face went pale. He took a step back, disbelief shadowing his eyes. No, you're saying my company killed her? Martha nodded slowly. And Sarah found out. She came to you that week, didn't she? To warn you. Michael's mind raced. He remembered it, Sarah's sudden visit 12 years ago, her insistence on talking about his wife, the fear in her eyes. He thought she was overreacting. He turned her away. Days later, she was dead. His chest tightened painfully. She tried to save me, he whispered. Martha closed her eyes, tears slipping down her cheeks. Your wife, your lover, your daughter, they were all connected by one thing, Michael, your silence. But Sarah, she didn't hate you. She wanted you to fight back. She believed only guilt could bring your heart back. Emily's voice cracked as she looked at her grandmother. You made me go to him, didn't you? Martha nodded weakly. I did. I told you to find him, to stand at his gate with that sign, because I knew no amount of money could wake his soul, only you could. Emily turned toward Michael. The man who had once been a stranger now stood before her, broken by truth. His hands trembled, his voice hoarse. All this time, I thought I was protecting my company. I didn't know I was protecting the people who killed the woman I loved. Silence hung heavy in the room. Then Michael's expression hardened, not with arrogance, but with resolve. He turned to Martha. Thank you for telling me. He turned to Emily. I swear to you, I'll make this right. He left the hospital that evening without his usual escort. He didn't return to his mansion. Instead, he went straight to the headquarters of Grant Industries. Inside the glass tower, the board members waited, tense and nervous. News of the investigation was spreading fast. Michael walked into the meeting room without a word. He placed a thick folder on the table and looked at each face, men and women who had once called him friend. 13 years ago, my wife died in a crash that was ruled accidental, but it wasn't. You knew it. You all knew it. One of them, an older man named Raymond Holt, tried to speak. Michael, this isn't the time. Michael slammed the folder open. Inside were copies of financial statements, signed approvals, hidden transfers. This is the truth. You used my grief to bury your crimes. You destroyed Sarah Parker when she came too close, and you made me believe her death was my fault. That ends today. The room went silent. He continued, voice low but firm, effective immediately. Every one of you is done here. You'll answer to the authorities. I've already sent copies of these documents to the Attorney General's office. Raymond stood up, furious. You'll lose everything, Michael. Michael looked at him calmly. Then maybe I'll finally have something worth keeping. He walked out of the boardroom as chaos erupted behind him. The company he built was collapsing, but for the first time in his life, he didn't feel fear. He felt free. That night, Michael visited Sarah's grave. The wind was cold, carrying the faint smell of rain. He placed a single white rose on the headstone and whispered, I finally listened. The next week, news channels all over the country ran the story. Billionaire exposes own company in massive corporate crime scandal. Reporters followed every moment of the trial. Board members were arrested. Accounts were frozen. Grant Industries lost half its value overnight. But Michael didn't disappear from public view. He stood before cameras again, not as a billionaire, but as a man who had nothing left to hide. I can't undo what's been done, but I can make sure the people who paid for my silence are heard. My wife deserved justice. Sarah Parker deserved truth. And Emily, she deserves a future built on honesty, not blood. He announced the creation of the Sarah Parker Foundation, dedicated to helping victims of corporate corruption and families torn apart by injustice.
The logo bore a simple inscription, "Truth Restores." When the press conference ended, Michael walked outside into the sunlight. Emily was waiting by the car, holding her grandmother's hand. She looked up at him, the man she once blamed for everything, and this time she smiled faintly. "She'd be proud," she said. He nodded, eyes glistening. "So would your mother." They stood there quietly as the city moved around them, the billionaire and the girl who changed everything. For once, Michael Grant didn't feel like a man haunted by his past. He felt like someone who finally found his way back to it, not to erase it, but to honor it. And as the evening sun cast long shadows across the pavement, Emily slipped her small hand into his. Together, they walked forward, towards the life her mother once dreamed they would have.
Months passed, and the storm that once loomed over Michael Grant's life finally began to clear. The tabloids that once tore him apart now praised his transformation, though he cared little for their words. What mattered was the quiet peace that had returned to his world, a peace born not from wealth or control, but from truth. Grant Industries was no longer the empire of fear it had once been. The company had undergone a complete reformation. Corrupt board members were removed, and the headlines that once screamed "Scandal at Grant Industries" now spoke of "Hope Restored." The Sarah Parker Foundation had become a beacon of change, providing medical support, education, and housing to families in need. But for Michael, the greatest change wasn't in his company, it was within himself. For years he had buried his heart beneath layers of pride and guilt. Now, every time he saw the name Sarah Parker Foundation engraved on the marble walls of his headquarters, he felt her presence, not as a wound, but as a guiding light. Emily had grown too. Her shy, uncertain demeanor had turned into quiet confidence. She had moved into the scholarship program as one of its first beneficiaries. Her grandmother, fully recovered, often watched her from the porch of their small but peaceful home in Queens, smiling as the girl she raised began to build a new life. One rainy afternoon, the kind of rain that once mirrored their pain, Emily stepped into the glass tower of Grant Industries once more. The receptionists greeted her by name this time. No cameras, no pity, just warmth. She carried her backpack and a folder of school reports, her eyes sparkling with the same determination that first drew Michael's attention. As she walked into his office, he found him standing by the window, staring out at the city skyline. He turned when he heard the door open, and for a moment, time seemed to fold upon itself. The billionaire who had once been haunted by ghosts, and the girl who had unknowingly brought him redemption. "You're early," Michael said with a faint smile. "I finished my classes," Emily replied softly, walking closer. "They asked me to speak at the Foundation's event next week about what forgiveness means." Michael's gaze softened. "And what will you say?" Emily hesitated, her eyes glancing at the rain-streaked glass. "I'll say that forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's choosing to stop hurting even when the pain deserves to stay." He nodded slowly, humbled by her wisdom. "Your mother would have been proud." "She already is," Emily said, and for the first time she smiled without sadness. There was a long silence, not heavy, but full of understanding. Michael reached into his desk and handed her a small envelope, aged and worn. "I found this in an old file. It was from your mother. She wrote it to you the week she was let go. I think she wanted you to have it when the time was right." Emily's hands trembled as she opened it. Inside was a short letter written in faded ink. "My sweet Emily, if life ever brings you before those who hurt us,
Don't let anger guide you. Remember, love outlasts the cruelty of men. Promise me, you'll live with heart, not hate." Tears filled her eyes. She folded the letter gently and held it to her chest. "Thank you," she whispered. Michael turned back to the window, his reflection ghosted beside hers. He said quietly, "Your mother once told me the same thing. I didn't listen then, but you made sure I did now." As the rain continued to fall, Emily stepped beside him. The city below shimmered with life, people rushing, cars gliding, lights glowing like stars on earth. For the first time in years, the sound of rain didn't feel like sorrow. It felt like renewal. Michael said after a pause, "You reminded me what money can't buy. Forgiveness." Emily smiled, her voice barely above a whisper. "And you reminded me that not all billionaires are heartless." They both laughed softly, and the sound carried through the vast, empty office like sunlight breaking through clouds. Outside, the rain eased into a drizzle, washing the glass clean. The same rain that had once drenched a desperate girl standing at a billionaire's gate. But this time, it fell on new beginnings. In the foundation's courtyard below, a new banner fluttered in the wind. The Sarah Parker Foundation, where compassion builds futures. As the camera slowly panned out from the high-rise window, the reflection of the two, the man redeemed and the girl who saved him, blurred into the skyline of New York. The storm had passed, and in its wake, something beautiful had grown.
Sometimes the richest hearts belong to the poorest souls. Emily's story spread quietly at first, a whisper shared among people who needed to believe that kindness still existed in the world. News outlets began covering the foundation's success stories, but what truly resonated weren't the numbers or the press conferences. It was the truth behind them. A billionaire, once known for arrogance, had opened his doors to the very people he used to overlook. The internet picked up the story. Someone recorded a short clip of Emily walking into the foundation on her first day as a scholarship student, the same girl who had once stood in the rain outside those gates. The caption read, "She begged for help once, now she helps others." It went viral overnight. Comments flooded in. Stories of children who had slept hungry but still dreamed. Parents who worked 3 jobs for their kids, and people who'd once been invisible but refused to give up. For the first time, the world wasn't talking about power or money. It was talking about humanity. Michael saw the clip late one night while scrolling through his phone. The video ended with Emily smiling, a soft piano melody beneath her voice. "You don't need to be rich to change your life. You just need to care." He set his phone down and stared out the window of his penthouse, the city lights below shimmering like reflections of 1,000 second chances. He whispered to himself, almost in disbelief. "Sarah, she did it. Through her daughter, she changed everything." Meanwhile, in a small apartment miles away, Emily sat beside her grandmother as the rain tapped softly against their window. The old woman's hands were frail but warm as she brushed back Emily's hair. "You see, my child," she said, smiling faintly, "your mother never left you. She just waited until the world was ready to hear her again." Emily looked at her and smiled. "I think she'd be proud of him, too, of Mr. Grant." Her grandmother nodded slowly. "Maybe that's what forgiveness truly means, healing both sides of the wound." Across the city, hundreds of children attended schools funded by the Sarah Parker Foundation. They wore blue badges with a silver feather on them, a symbol of hope, light, and second chances. Each one represented a dream once buried under hardship, now taking flight. And among all those children, every time one of them said, "I want to be like Emily Parker someday," she would blush, laugh softly, and reply, "No, Be even better. Change someone's world the way mine was changed. The rain came again that evening, gentle and rhythmic, echoing the first night Emily stood at those gates. But this time no one was begging, no one was forgotten. The rain no longer carried sorrow, it carried renewal. Michael stood on the foundation's rooftop during a charity event, surrounded by families and children whose laughter filled the air. He looked around not as a man of wealth, but as someone reborn through the pain he once tried to bury. When Emily walked up beside him, he handed her a small pin engraved with her mother's initials. "You earned this," he said quietly. "You gave her story a heartbeat again." She took it with trembling hands, tears glimmering in her eyes. "And you gave me something I thought I'd never have again," she replied. "A reason to believe in people." He smiled, a faint, sincere smile that softened every hard line of his face. "You reminded me that love isn't weakness. It's the only real strength." They stood together in silence as the city lights flickered below, a symbol of all the lives that had been touched by one girl's courage and one man's redemption. If this story touched you, drop a heart in the comments for every child who never gave up hope, for every dreamer standing in the rain, waiting for the world to notice them. Because sometimes the ones with the least to give end up giving the most. And sometimes the coldest hearts only need one small hand to remind them what warmth feels like. For the forgotten, for the fighters, for the ones who believe that even the hardest rain can lead to the brightest dawn